We're closing off the Zexal era with another dual terminal archetype known as Laval's, used by Tetsu Tamatsu from Zexal. And yes, this is the only picture we have of him because he hasn't appeared on screen outside of this profile picture on paper, as you can see. All we know is that 4 was targeting him during the World Duel Carnival, and that his ace monster was a certain Laval monster. And so what do Laval monsters do? Well, their specialty is setting up the graveyard, and that they're fire monsters with, of course, the usual fire gimmick, that is the 200 or less defense. So let's take a look at them, shall we? We start off with the level 1 Lavalval Volcano Handmaiden. It's a level 1 tuner and with 100 attack and 200 defense, and when this card is sent to the graveyard, if you have a Laval monster in your graveyard other than her, you can send a Laval monster from your deck to your graveyard. And yep, this is a pretty standard effect to start off the Laval archetype review, meaning that she's a level 1 tuner which has a nice graveyard effects if she's sent to the graveyard by any way. So, meaning you can use this effect to set up your graveyard further if you have more Laval monsters in your graveyard, which you most probably will have at the moment. So yeah, it's a nice level 1 tuner, and you definitely want to run 2 to 3 of her in your deck. Next up we have Soaring Eagle Above the Searing Land. Yeah, it doesn't have Laval in the name, but it's actually a Laval card. If this card is sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon, you can special summon this card. You must have 3 or more Laval monsters with different names in your graveyard to activate and resolve this effect. And if it is special summoned by this way, you banish it when it leaves the field. It's another nice tuner to consider having, since you can basically summon a synchro monster and then gain this thing back in order to climb up one more level after that. So yeah, it works as a decent synchro climbing mechanic. So yeah, several other Laval monsters have banish recovery. However, they're pretty much worthless, since most of the monsters that banish stuff or banish themselves are monsters like these, which don't have Laval in the name, meaning they're not targetable or searchable by those monsters. So yeah, kind of sad. I wish this thing had Laval in its name. Next up we have Laval COATL, which, fun fact, lore-wise becomes Digusto Phoenix from the previous review, as you can see. Anyway, it's a level 2 with 1300 attack and 700 defense. It's also a tuner monster, and if you have 3 or more Laval monster with different names in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. Simple consistency special summon effect for this thing, as we can see, keeps up with the theme of the deck with its condition. And yeah, what's not to like? You basically run 3 of these in any Laval build. And yep, as you can probably see from the abundance of tuners, Lavals are primarily a synchro spam archetype, which makes it very weird that they appeared in the Zexal era. Next up we have Laval Forest Sprite. It's a level 2 Pyro tuner with 300 attack and 200 defense, and when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, all face-up Laval monsters you control gain 200 attack for each Laval monster in your graveyard until the end phase. Yeah, I mean, it keeps up with the theme of the deck, but this attack boost is so insignificant that it borderline hurts. And spoiler warning, this is actually their best monster within this category, so go figure. You basically run this because it's a nice splashable level 2 fire tuner with 200 defense. Oh, next up we actually have a treat, and such a disastrous waste of an artwork. Laval Lakeside Lady is their first level 3, and it also happens to be a tuner. Jesus Christ, we're already like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards in, and we're already only talking about tuners. Needle Fiber would be proud. Anyway, if this card is in your graveyard, you can have 3 or more, and if you have 3 or more Laval monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can banish this card and one other Laval monster from your graveyard to target one set card your opponent controls and destroy that target. You know, for that condition on a level 3 tuner, I would have expected to destroy any card on the field, not any set card, which pushes this card into the irrelevant territory. But good lord, such a disastrous waste of artwork, as I already said. Such a shame, really. Next up we have a Laval Miller. It's level 3 with 300 attack and 400 defense. And when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can send 2 Laval monsters from your deck to the graveyard. This is an okay effect, but the main bummer of this thing is that this thing needs to be destroyed specifically by battle in order to apply this effect. And let's be honest, no one is going to be destroying this by battle anytime soon. Either you're going to link it away sooner because it's a frail level 3, or the opponent is going to get rid of it by other means, so no. Next up we have Cayenne, the Master Magma Blacksmith. You can banish this card from your graveyard and all face-up Laval monsters you currently control gain 400 attack. And yep, that's literally all it does. Just a measly 400 attack point boost. You might as well run a Forest Sprite instead. Next up we have Prominence, the Molten Swordsman, our first level 4. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can banish 1 Laval monster from your graveyard. This card gains 300 attack until the end phase. Yeah, this effect is arguably even worse than Cayenne, but this actually has the benefit of being searchable by fire formation tanky, which makes it better, I guess, maybe. But yeah, Junk Blader is a better card than this. Let that sink in. Next up we have Laval Magma Cannoneer. It's another level 4, and up to twice per turn you can send 1 fire monster from your hand to the graveyard to inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Or you cannot be a complete idiot and just run Volcanics instead of this card. How handy. And yeah, I know that this thing works on any fire monster, but let's be honest, what else are you going to run next to Laval's? Yeah, sure, tech options are actually quite the spectacle. You can actually run the volcanic shell from the Volcanics in order to mill your deck for 2 additional cards, but I don't know. In other words, don't run this. Next up we have Laval PHLOGIS. I hope I pronounced that right. Anyway, when this card is sent to the graveyard, all Laval monsters you currently control gain 300 attack. Again with the pitiful stat boost. What the hell is up with this archetype? I mean, it keeps up with the theme of the deck in form of getting stuff into the graveyard, but the benefits you get for doing that are very superfluous and irrelevant, so no, don't run this. Next up we have Laval Warrior. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original attack of the destroyed monster, and you must have 4 or more Laval monsters with different names in your graveyard to activate and resolve this effect. To put it simply, this is actually something you build your entire deck around by utilizing Rhoda and Moon Mirror Shield. Of course, you need to have the appropriate graveyard set up beforehand to do so, so I'd say skip this one in a generic Laval build. Next up we have Laval Blaster. When this card is normal summoned, if you have a Laval monster in your graveyard other than Laval Blaster, you can choose a number from 1 to 5, then send that many cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard. Then this card gains 200 attack for each Laval monster sent to the graveyard to activate this effect. Yeah, I would actually say that this is a somewhat better effect than Forest Sprite, but in terms of attack gainage, but there's one big but here. This effect is primarily used to set up the graveyard and, well, basically to mill your deck, because if that grass looks greener is banned, it's pretty much banned for a reason, and yeah. If you can pair up multiples of these, you can potentially get some nice and decent graveyard set up along with potentially decent beat sticks. So yeah, 2 or 3 of these should be fine. Next up we have Laval Cannon. When this card is normal or flip summoned, good lord, you can target one of your banished Laval monsters and special summon that target. Yeah, this is the card that falls under the problem I mentioned earlier when I got to the birds. This is the Searing Land bird. This thing is meant to require banished Lavals, but like I said earlier, most of the cards which banish themselves or have banish effects are not Laval monsters by name, so this thing is pretty much useless with very few targets to target, actually. So I'd say run by preference or as an attack option at best. Next up we have their first level 5 and, well, actually their only level 5, Laval Burner. If you have 3 or more Laval monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. It's essentially Laval COATL but a higher level, and yeah, with pretty much the same activation conditions. Run 3 of them at all time because it's a free monster, and in today's era you need as many free monsters as you can possibly get. Next up we have Laval LANCELORD. You can normal summon this card without tributing because this is a level 6, and if you do, during the end phase send it to the graveyard. When this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one of your banished fire monsters, add that target to the hand. Again, it's a banish recovery card which are useless by nature in this deck, but I would really want to point out how the effects contradict each other. You get to normal summon it without tributing. Okay, fair enough. During the end phase you get to send it to the graveyard. Okay, fair enough as well. It plays up into the theme of the deck. However, the second effect can only be activated when it is destroyed, which the first effect does not specify. It just sends it to the graveyard, which is not destruction. Meaning you cannot activate the second effect. So yeah, this is a prototype heraldic beast Leo if I ever saw one, but much uglier and much less useful. Next up we have their final monster, the level 7 Laval Judgment Lord. Once per turn you can banish one Laval monster from your graveyard to inflict 1000 damage to your opponent, but Judgment Lord cannot declare an attack that in the turn this effect is activated. Another in the great line of pointless GX era burn cards. At least this card has decent burn damage that it spews out, but still it's a pointless gimmick that should be just that, a pointless gimmick. Next up we move on to their extra deck with their synchro monsters, first of which we have Laval Dual Slasher. It's a level 5 which requires one tuner or one or more non-tuner fire monsters as material, has decent stats for a level 5 as well. And this card gains effects based on the number of Laval monsters in your graveyard. If 2 or more once per turn, if it attacks a defense position monster, it can attack once again in a row. And if 3 or more, if it attacks a defense position monster, it inflicts piercing damage. Which is, okay, it's a decent beat stick for a level 5, and that's about as far as it goes. Because defense position monsters are very rare in today's meta due to the abundance of link monsters in the game. And not to mention, okay, Master Rule 4 is coming, so defense position monsters might be a lot more prominent, but not by much. It's a decent level 5 beat stick, and that's about as far as it goes. Next up we have a bit more relevant choice in your extra deck toolbox for a level 5, that being their other level 5, Lavalval Dragon. It's a level 5 with 2000 attack and 1100 defense, it has the same summoning condition as Dual Slasher, and it has the effect that you can shuffle 2 Laval monsters from your graveyard into your main deck to target one card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. And mind you, this effect is not once per turn, meaning you can actually get some pretty outstanding mileage from this card if you happen to have the correct graveyard setup. And yeah, Laval decks were actually a pretty nasty thing to go up against since that grass looks greener was still legal, meaning that people would play 60 cards decks and play that grass looks greener to dump 20 cards into their deck, which of course would include a decent amount of Laval cards, and then they would go into this, and then they would clear the field for games. So yeah, absolutely make some room for this lovely piece of tech in your Laval extra deck toolbox. Next up we have their first level 6, it's not their only level 6, Lavalval Dragoon. It has also the exact same summoning condition as the previous two monsters, has 2500 attack, and once per turn you can add one Laval monster from your deck to your hand, then send one Laval monster from your hand to the graveyard. It's as simple as it gets, my dudes. What do I say about this? It's a simple once per turn searcher alongside a once per turn graveyard setup effect, which is beyond lovely. Run 3, you'll never regret it. Next up we have Laval the Greater, their final level 6. And it also has the same summoning condition as all the other monsters. And when this card is synchro summoned, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, and if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish one Laval monster from your graveyard instead. Solid protection, and when it's synchro summon you get to discard any card from your hand, which is okay. It opens some graveyard setup gates for the archetype, but it's mostly superfluous when you get to summon him. Yeah, if you want a level 6 you're better off with Dragoon, but Dragoon has no protection, so it can go either way, I suppose. But anyway, next up we have their final synchro monster, the level 7 Laval STENNON. It also has the same special summoning conditions as the previous monsters, and when it's synchro summon you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, just like Laval the Greater, and during either player's turn, when this card is targeted by a card effect, you can banish one Laval monster from your graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy the targeting card. It's basically a higher level monster with more stats, and within the effect department a different flavor of the Laval the Greater, so I guess it's somewhat worth it, but in the same time no, because yeah, it's just that and this one can only work on effects that target this thing, meaning it's completely open to attacks for any effects which do not target it, so run by preference in my opinion. Now we move on to their two Xyz monsters, their two final monsters in general. The first of which we have the rank 3 Lavalval IGNIS. It requires 2 or level 3 monsters, has 1800 attack and 1400 defense, and if this card is attacks or is attacked during the damage step in either player's turn, you can detach one Xyz material from this card, and once per battle this card gains 500 attack until the end of this turn. Fine, I guess. You know, it's outclassed by the majority of the rank 3 lineup already, especially stuff like number 17 Leviathan Dragon, and stuff like also Granosaurus, which is very, I mean, if you really feel like it, then run one of them if you feel like it. But I know what you're here for already. The coup de grace of the Laval archetype, the rank 4 Xyz Lavalval Chain. Requires any level 4 and 2 level 4 monsters, has 1800 attack, and once per turn you can detach an Xyz material from this card to activate one of these effects. Either send one card from your deck to the graveyard, or choose one monster from your deck and place it on the top of your deck. And to anyone's to anyone's shock, I should say, this thing is banned, and for a very good reason. An archetypal way to send any card to your from your deck to your graveyard, not even generic cards such as Foolish Burial or Foolish Burial Goods. Yeah, they're separated into two: Foolish Burial for monsters and Foolish Burial Goods for spell and trap. And yeah, not even generic non-archetypal cards have this sort of effect, meaning this card would be hit sooner or later. And the most notable way this thing actually got hit was actually in a Djinn Releaser deck, where you could also use the level 4 Djinn Releaser to use this thing to summon this thing, since it was a level 4. Detach this, to send another Djinn Releaser or any other Djinn which you might need at the moment. Send it to your graveyard, and then just ritual summon anything which you might need. I presume the ritual monsters that were summoned were Necros monsters actually. So yeah. The second effect actually works with stuff like Laval Blaster. I think that was what this is called. Yeah, Laval Blaster, that's what he was called. But top decking Laval monsters is not something Laval's like doing that much, but yeah, if this thing ever comes back, you should definitely run this card. It's the definitive quote-unquote boss monster of the Laval archetype. Anyway, next up we move on to the spell and trap lineup, first of which is MOLTEN Conduction Field. Send 2 Laval monsters from your deck to your graveyard. Just run 3 of these. You basically have to. If you're not, if you don't play 3 of these, you're not playing Lavals. A generic card such as Foolish Barrier is limited because it sends one of any monster to the graveyard, and this allows you to send 2 Laval monsters to the graveyard. What's not to like? Run 3. You'll never regret it. Next up we have Searing Firewall, their other and final spell card. It's a quick play that says banish any number of Laval monsters from your graveyard and special summon an equal number of Laval tokens, which are Pyro type fire level 1 and 0 attack and 0 defense, in defense position. Honestly, this is a very nice token generator. For the price of banishing any number of Laval monsters from your graveyard, you can actually fill your field up with tokens, which you can proceed to use as for link material. And not to mention, this is even a quick play. So yeah, run 3 at all times. Next up we have Burgeoning WHIRLFLAME. Counter trap. When a trap card is activated, send one Laval monster from your hand to the graveyard, negate the activation and destroy it. And if this card is in the graveyard, you can banish 2 fire monsters from your graveyard to add this card to your hand. It has its qualities, but it's essentially outclassed by Red Reboot, which is actually limited to this day, because not only does it stop trap cards, stop one trap card, but it actually stops trap cards for the rest of the turn after it was activated. So yeah, run as a tech option at most. Next up we have Molten Whirlwind Wall, a continuous trap, and which says that all face-up Laval monsters you currently control gain 100 attack for each Laval monster in your graveyard. I've already said how pointless these kind of effects were, in the monster form mind you, so this effect is borderline inconsequential, so you basically run any of the monsters which had this sort of effect, so yeah, absolutely ignore this one. And their final card is DUSTFLAME Blast, and which requires you to banish all Laval monsters from your graveyard to destroy any number of cards on the field up to the number of monsters banished for this card's activation. If you don't feel like spamming tokens onto the field, you can pretty much get some mileage out of this thing, because they become field pops if you don't have room for tokens to spare. So yeah, great card, and you should definitely consider running it. And now time for the grades. In terms of consistency, the generic fire support such as Royal Firestorm Guards usually tend to kick this thing back into the game, but well, that is more appropriate to mention the comeback ability. But generic fire support is not that very common, so the consistency. I'm obligated, not obligated. I feel like I should give them a 1 out of 3, but the sheer amount of their graveyard setup from which they proceed to make their plays is just enough to give them a 2 out of 3. In terms of power, the only extra deck monsters that see constant play in Lavals are Dragoon, Dragon, and maybe the 2 protection Synchros, and that's somewhat of a potential to hit hard, but it's rarely met, so a 2 out of 3. And then comeback ability, yeah, Royal Firestorm Guards really kick things up a notch when it's your goal to recycle stuff from the graveyard and then go back into the game. Rekindling is also a very nice tech option, and it's pretty ridiculous, so I'm gonna give him 2 out of 3 because it's not perfect, but it's certainly there. Protection, yeah, protection only exists in form of the 2 synchro monsters, which are not very much worth running, so 1 out of 3 there. And as for the versatility, yeah, they have access to Rekindling, Royal Firestorm Guards, and maybe occasionally they see some play in volcanic decks, so it's fine enough for a 2 out of 3 in my opinion. So yeah, those were Laval's. I think they can actually become a very prominent Lightsworn like deck if they receive some new support, which will revitalize their playstyle, and flame wheels are actually very compatible with them. The Neo Flame, also to be more precise. So yeah, they can certainly rise to greatness if they receive some new support for the modern game. Maybe a new Link monster, or maybe an extra deck monster. Period. Maybe maybe a simple low-level searcher, which can basically kickstart some new plays. And yeah, that's pretty much what this deck is all about. And we are done with the Zexal era. Next time we move on to the Dual Monsters era with 2 more archetypes to cover. After which we have the 2 new archetypes from Collection Pack 2020. And as soon as all their cards are revealed, I'll be reviewing those. One is a GX era archetype, and one is a Vrains era archetype. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, walkthroughs, and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. See you all. Have a good day, and peace.